The CEO and the cleaner. The day the most powerful man in the building stopped attention. Story lovers who crave tales that take your breath away. If you enjoy drama, intrigue, and unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and leave your comments. Are you ready for the secret that will shake the foundations of New York City's elite? Get ready. This is The Secret of the Steel Tower. The unseen glimpse. The elevator descended in absolute silence. The brushed steel reflected the cold contours of a man who no longer noticed his own reflection. Alexander Thorne was motionless. His graphite gray suit was impeccable. His Italian cufflinks glinted, and his eyes were fixed on the scanning dot in front of him. His hands were clasped, his mind on some invisible mental spreadsheet. The display marked the number 27, a slight shudder on the floor, and the world below continued. He didn't turn his head. He didn't sigh. He didn't even realize that deep down, his own thoughts no longer made a sound. Some days feel like years. Some years feel like days. When the elevator slowed on the ground floor, the dry sound of the rails seemed louder than it should. The doors opened, and order gave way to noise. There was movement in the lobby. Someone was sweeping the floor, too fast, as if the world were about to end in 5 minutes, and she needed to clean it before then. The broom slid back and forth, but what caught his gaze wasn't the motion. It was the weight. 2 small bodies tied to her back, sleeping in one of those makeshift fabric slings, hanging like tired angels. Their heads rested on the back of her neck. Their little legs dangled loosely. Their cheeks brushed her skin, as if that was the only safe place in the world. She wore a faded headscarf. Her shoes were worn. The cleaning uniform had stains on the hem. And she just kept on cleaning. Alexander didn't move. No words. No sound. Just the dry noise of the broom on the marble. She noticed his presence. Of course she did. But she didn't look up. She didn't stop. Her head remained bowed, focused on the floor, as if it were a divine obligation. The only gesture that escaped her control was a slight clenching of her hands on the broomstick. Discreet? Almost imperceptible. But not to him. Alexander stepped out of the elevator. She moved 1 step to the side. He didn't speak to anyone. Not to her. But he didn't move on. He stood there, watching, like someone trying to understand a foreign language just by its sound. The security guard, from a distance, swallowed hard. The receptionist, behind the counter, pretended not to see. The woman cleaned around the elevator door with precision, and for an instant, her eyes met his. It was a raw, unfiltered moment, without emotional makeup. She didn't look at him with shame, or with flattery, or with fear. She looked at him as if to say, "I am exhausted, but I will not break." It was the look of someone who has 30 seconds of peace before one of the children wakes up. Alexander breathed. For the first time in hours, he truly breathed, and he felt something that had no name. It wasn't pity. It wasn't desire. It wasn't charity. It was unease. The clock in the lobby chimed every 15 minutes, a reminder of time that no one ever listened to. But he heard it now, because there was something profoundly wrong with all of this, with the way everyone looked away, with how no one, not a single person, seemed to notice that this woman was carrying 2 children on her back while she cleaned the floor of a 47-story building. He wasn't used to feeling uncomfortable. His whole life was built on not feeling. But now he felt, and it unsettled him. His phone vibrated in his inner jacket pocket. 3 messages. A meeting on the 12th floor in 30 minutes. His assistant was waiting with the merger report. He didn't reply. Not yet, because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't in a hurry. The woman finished sweeping the hallway. She didn't look up again. She entered the janitor's closet. She closed the door behind her. Silence returned, but it wasn't the same. Alexander got into the black SUV that was already waiting for him at the side door. The driver didn't speak. He was used to the boss's silence, but this time, something was different. "What's the name of the cleaning lady who was on the ground floor?" The driver hesitated. He looked in the rearview mirror, as if unsure he had heard correctly. "Excuse me, sir?" "The woman who was cleaning, with 2 babies on her back. Find out her name." The driver just nodded. Alexander didn't repeat himself. The tires glided through the city streets, but he was still there, standing in the lobby, standing in that gaze. It had been 20 years since he had been distracted. Not when he lost his father. Not when the company nearly went bankrupt. Not when he laid off 4,000 people in 1 week. But now the world seemed a little out of place. The image of her returned like a reflection in a dark car window. The headscarf, her feet, her hands, and above all, her silence. A silence that said more than all the reports he had ever read. The next day, he entered the building through the same door. The security guard smiled at him automatically. The elevator was already being called. His assistants were waiting for him on the 30th floor. His schedule was full. But Alexander didn't go up. He walked to the end of the hallway. The janitor's closet was locked. The light was off. Across the hall, in the staff break room, there was a table with 4 chairs. One of them was empty. The others had 2 glasses of juice and 3 pieces of stale bread. And she was there, sitting, with the 2 children on her lap, trying to get them to sleep, despite the noise of other employees coming and going. She didn't see him arrive. He watched in silence. He watched her cradle the children. He noticed the deep, dark circles under her eyes, the held breath. "Has breakfast arrived yet?" He raised his eyes. The other 3 employees in the room froze. Alexander spoke naturally, as if it were common for a CEO to ask that. She swallowed. It took her a moment to reply. "We take it at the end of the line, if there's any left." He didn't smile. He just looked at the nearest guard and said, "Serve her breakfast now, full and hot." Then he turned and left. He didn't wait for a thank you or an explanation, but he knew everyone would be talking about this, and curiously, he didn't care, because for the first time in decades, something in the world stopped making sense, and that something was carrying 2 children on her back, and she didn't ask anything of anyone. Alexander entered the elevator. The glass reflected his face. For the first time in years, he didn't look so self-assured. The door closed, but her image did not disappear. A quiet reckoning, she arrived before the sun. 5:32 a.m. The city still sleepy. The sky stained with a washed-out blue, and Sophia was already crossing the main street with her 2 children tied to her back, 1 on each side, their bodies held by a makeshift fabric sling, the cold sweat beginning to stick to the base of her neck. She didn't wear a watch. She measured time by the children's cries, by the noise of the garbage truck, by the changing of the guards' shifts. Every sound had a meaning. Every step, its urgency. The building where she worked was so tall that her eyes couldn't reach the top, a giant of glass, steel, and distances that were not made for people like her. The badge she wore had been reprinted 3 times. The ink was so faded it was hard to read her name. Sophia didn't need to think to climb the service stairs. 15 flights. The elevators weren't allowed for cleaning staff before 7 a.m. But the weight of the children forced her to go slowly. She had learned to breathe between one step and the next, to carry her dignity with the same care she carried her children. In the supply room, the smell of bleach stung her eyes. She arranged the children on a makeshift mattress on the floor, 2 thin pillows, a sheet with cartoon characters no one would recognize. The twins slept together. embracing each other as if they were an extension of the same body. Sophia took a deep breath. She closed her eyes for 3 seconds. Then she got up, put on her gloves, tied her hair back, and began her shift. No dumoha. Good mornings on the internal radio. No courtesies between the walls. Most employees ignored her with the naturalness of someone who has forgotten that other people exist. Some looked at her with contempt. A group of interns commented, louder than necessary. I bet she's already looking for someone to pay her bills. Maybe it's a strategy. 2 kids in the package. Imagine the drama. Hey, don't talk like that. She's not even ugly. They laughed. Sophia didn't respond. She had already learned that dignity is silence when you want to scream. In room 2314, she poured disinfectant on the floor, spread it with the mop. She repeated mechanical gestures with surgical precision. Every movement was rhythm, was routine, was what kept her world standing. Until the routine was broken. At 6:47, a hurried guard entered the cleaning sector, paper in hand, eyes lowered. This is for you, Ms. Sophia. She wiped her hands on her uniform before taking the paper. Break room, reserved table, breakfast served. Signed, L. She froze for 2 seconds. Then she folded the paper without emotion on her face. She didn't comment. She just walked to the staff room, where the smell of hot pastries hit her hard. The table in the corner was set. Juice, coffee, cut fruit, a cloth napkin. The stairs fell on her like spotlights. She felt the weight. She knew that everyone there was about to construct a version of her that she didn't control. She sat in silence. She ate little, half an apple, a sip of coffee. The rest she put in a makeshift bag for her children. One of the older employees tried to make conversation, forcing an uncomfortable friendliness. Scoring points, huh? She didn't reply. From the other side of the glass, Alexander watched. He was in a meeting room on the 12th floor. He couldn't hear what they were saying. He only saw. He saw how she didn't lower her head. He saw how she didn't give in to what they expected her to be. He had also lived that, in a different way, with different pains. But he recognized what it's like to grow up having to swallow your pride to get ahead. Hours later, when this morning had lost its brightness, Alexander called his assistant. I want her full name, and her story, but be careful, discreetly. The assistant swallowed. The cleaning lady? Alexander looked up, just for a second. Sophia? He had memorized her name. The assistant left in silence. Downstairs, Sophia was changing the children's diaper on a Formica counter. She used tissues she had brought from home because the ones from the company were too rough. She sang a quiet, old song she had learned from her grandmother. The children laughed. One clapped. The other rested his face on her chest and murmured "Mama" in a sleepy voice. For 5 minutes, the world was just that. The muffled laughter of 2 children and the silent warmth of a woman who was fighting not to let pain turn into rage. But the real world always returns. At the shift change, the operations coordinator approached her with cold eyes. You're obstructing the flow, Sophia. Me? The hallways must be clear. And, she hesitated, you brought the children again. Sophia took a deep breath. I have no one to leave them with. I understand, but some employees have complained. And, well, it's not a suitable environment for babies. Sophia didn't reply. If this continues, we'll have to call human resources. Call them. The coordinator swallowed. She didn't expect a comeback. She left. From the top floor, Alexander saw part of the conversation. He couldn't hear, but he understood. Sophia's body spoke. The way she returned to the room, firm, with watery eyes, her back straight. That night, in her flat, if it could even be called that, the ceiling was leaking. Water slowly filtered through, as if lazily. The room smelled of mold. A window was stuck, a two-burner stove, and a makeshift clothesline hung with duct tape between the wardrobe and the wall. Sophia cooked rice. She fried an egg. She divided it into 3 plastic plates. The children went to sleep early. Tired. The heat was stifling. And she sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, with her old phone in her hands. She opened the gallery. There was only one recent photo in it. She was sweaty, tired, with deep circles under her eyes, holding the 2 in her arms, one on each side. Someone had taken the photo without her noticing. She stared at it for a while. She closed her eyes. The silence of the place was so great, she could hear her heart. The next morning, she was at the building by 6. Again. And this time, the receptionist looked at her with suspicion. A paper on the counter. Sign here. What is it? Warning notice. Reason: constant presence of minors in an inappropriate work environment. Sophia signed without arguing. She understood. Breakfast had become gossip. Her name circulated, not as a person, as a rumor. But she had no time to defend herself from those who only wanted to see scandal where there was only survival. A public declaration. At that very moment, on the 43rd floor, Alexander received an email. Subject: cleaning employee, inappropriate situation. Dear Mr. Thorne, several complaints have been formally made regarding your employee Sophia Vance. The constant presence of minors in the company's facilities is causing discomfort and an inappropriate public perception, especially considering the recent incident in which the employee was seen receiving preferential treatment during unauthorized hours. We suggest a formal warning and subsequent termination of the employee to avoid setting a precedent. Alexander didn't reply to the email. He went down. In person. In front of the meeting room, he stood before 3 managers. Who authorized the warning, Sophia? Silence. Who? One of the coordinators stammered. It was a sector decision, sir. The presence of the children is not... She will continue to come with her children. Every day. Until further notice. And anyone who has any comment about it can leave the company. No one said anything. Alexander walked into his room. The janitor's closet. It was empty. But on the table, there was a notebook. He opened it. Inside, old newspaper clippings, crayon drawings from children, a small, handwritten paper note. Mommy, we love you very much. He closed it, and for the first time in a long time, he remembered what it was like to admire someone. When she returned, she found the warning notice torn up in the trash, and a new paper on the table. Next coffee, with me. Signed A. Sophia folded the paper with the tips of her fingers, as if holding something too hot. Next coffee, with me. No date, no time, no formal invitation. Just the phrase, just the gesture. She folded it into a square and put it in the inner pocket of her apron. But the paper seemed to burn inside her. The rest of the day went on as always. Or tried to. She swept the floor on the ground floor, cleaned the bathrooms on the 5th, changed the trash bags on the executive floor. But her eyes weren't focused on what they were seeing. Her hands kept moving, but her head spun around something that refused to be named. Alexander didn't appear that day, or the next. But on Thursday, at 11:12 a.m., he went down to the building's maintenance sector personally. He didn't announce it. He didn't send for her. He just appeared. The coffee machine here is garbage, he said, as if it were a common topic. Sophia was behind the counter, organizing rags and brooms. She didn't expect him. When she looked up, he was there, standing, hands in his pockets, and a slight frown, as if he was wondering what exactly he was doing there. She didn't reply. He gestured with his chin towards the back room. "Is there a chair in there, or do you just sit on the floor?" She hesitated. Then she walked to the next room and came back with a blue plastic chair. He took another one and sat down. Neither of them said anything for a few seconds. The noise of the company continued, printers spitting out paper, phones ringing, shoes hitting the marble floor. But inside that cleaning room, it was a different time. "Are you always like that?" he asked, looking at the floor. "Like what?" "Quiet. Firm." She thought before answering. "I speak when it's worth it to waste my voice." He smiled sideways, a brief, almost invisible smile, but one that broke something inside him. "And you?" she asked, surprised by her own boldness. "Are you always like that? Do you just show up, leave a little note, and disappear?" He shrugged, but his gaze, for the first time, seemed to allow itself to be human. "I'm trying to figure out why I care." Sophia swallowed. "Then you don't care. You're just curious." "Right," he shook his head. "Curiosity passes. This hasn't passed yet." She looked at him as if looking at a dangerous place, familiar and dangerous, and she decided it was enough. She stood up from the chair. "I have to work." Alexander didn't insist. He just watched. Then he stood up too. As he was leaving, he said, without looking back, "One of the children called me Dad yesterday." She froze. Her shoulders tensed. The air caught in her lungs. "It was by accident," she said, her voice a thread. "I know. They have no idea. They don't know what that means." Alexander turned to look at her. "And do you?" She held his gaze. "I know what it feels like when it ends." They fell silent. And then he left, without another word. That night, Sophia took longer to fall asleep. One of the children had a fever. The other wouldn't stop calling her. She divided herself between the two, trying to stay calm. Sweating, trembling. The fever wouldn't go down. She called the corner pharmacy. It was closed. She ran down with one child in her arms, crossed 2 streets, came back with the wrong syrup, tried again. It was 3 a.m. when they both finally fell asleep. She sat on the kitchen floor, splashed her face with tap water, and rested her head against the cold tile. Tomorrow was Friday, and she couldn't miss work. The next morning when she arrived at the building, her eyes were red. Her uniform was still damp. Her body was tense. Leonardo saw her from afar, but didn't approach. He just watched. From inside the glass room, behind a pile of papers that suddenly no longer seemed to matter. 2 days later, she tried to avoid him. She cleaned floors on alternate schedules. She used different routes. She pretended not to see him. He noticed, and he respected it. For a while, until fate decided to intervene. It was Monday, late in the afternoon. She was leaving through the employee entrance with the 2 children in her arms. One in her arms, one on her back. The sun had already disappeared behind the buildings. The sky had that ugly, end-of-the-day color that signals rain. A black car pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. "Sophia?" She turned slowly, and the past she had tried to bury whole resurfaced. Richard, the children's father, impeccable suit, trimmed beard, expensive watch, a luxury car she had never seen. He smiled, a weightless smile, a practiced smile. "You look beautiful," he said. She didn't reply. "Them, are those them?" He looked at the children. She hugged the children tightly to her chest. The older one, still sleepy, whispered, "Mama, what do you want?" "I came to do the right thing. I want to recognize the children, give them my last name." She laughed, a short, ugly, bitter laugh. "After 3 years? I was far away. Things happened, but now I want to be a part of their lives." She looked him in the eye. You want to look like a part, not be one. He sighed, feigning regret. We can solve this like adults, without a fight. It could be good for them. A last name, opportunities. She felt the rage start to boil inside her, but she didn't explode. Not here. Not in front of them. "Richard," she said. He didn't insist, but he left an envelope on the back seat and got in the car. Before leaving, he said, "You'll be hearing from my lawyers." The car sped off, and she collapsed. But she didn't cry. She just sat on the curb with the 2 children in her arms and felt the weight of the whole world crushing her chest. It was at that moment that Alexander appeared. He didn't see the whole conversation, just the final scene. Her on the curb, the children asleep, and an expensive car driving away. He approached. He said nothing. He sat down beside her, in silence. After a while, he asked, "Who was that?" She replied without looking, "The father. He wants something?" He wants to pretend he's a father now, after disappearing since the pregnancy test. Alexander closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, he was decided. "Can I help you?" "No, it's not charity. Still, no." "Why?" "Because everything people like you give comes with strings attached later. And if it doesn't?" She looked at him, exhausted. "Then it's worse, because then I don't know what you really want." They looked at each other for a long time. He broke the silence, his voice lower. "Justice. That doesn't exist for people like me." "Maybe it does, if someone pays for it." She stood up. "I'm not a social project. I know. And I'm not your end-of-the-day distraction. I know that too." She took a deep breath. She almost said something, but she stopped. She walked away with the children in her arms. The next morning, Alexander called his legal team. He asked for silence, discretion, and the best family lawyers the country could offer. He gave one single order. "I want her name and the children's names protected, whatever it takes." The whole room looked at him, not understanding. But no one asked. He wasn't doing it to please her, or to clear his conscience. He was doing it because he had seen the scene. Because the curb was not her place. Because no one who carries the weight of 2 children on their back should have to defend themselves alone. And because, even if he didn't know it, he had already started to care too much to pretend that he didn't. The public uprising. In the following days, the tension didn't dissolve. It spread. No one said Sophia's name aloud, but it ran through the hallways in prolonged stares, uncomfortable whispers, and questions disguised as curiosity. Some employees began telling their versions of what they saw. Others invented what they wished was true. And what was once only silence began to turn into noise, until the first note appeared, on a small blog, then on a gossip profile. And in less than 24 hours, the case exploded. The scandal began as a whisper. A message crossed a corporate WhatsApp group, a screenshot of a poorly cropped email, a theory, a vile nickname. And before noon, the hallways were already vibrating with the dirty energy of those who smell destruction before truth. Late in the afternoon, news outlets received the leak, a visually cheap but effective dossier. A blurry photo of Alexander leaving the maintenance sector, an image of her with her children in her arms, inside the company lobby, an invented caption, "Multi-millionaire CEO has relationship with cleaning employee and is secretly raising her children." The site exploded. The headline escalated. The next morning, Alexander entered the building and immediately noticed that the air had changed. The stairs no longer avoided contact. They sought it. Employees who were once hurried now hesitated to greet him. He walked down the hall like someone passing through an invisible crowd that was silently screaming. But he didn't change his pace. He didn't lower his gaze. In the presidential office, the meeting started before he sat down. "We need to talk," one of the board members said. an older man in a well-pressed suit, in constant fear of losing power. "I'm listening," Alexander replied. The marketing director was more direct. "The stocks have already felt the impact. We're receiving messages from investors, sponsors, people asking if you're going to leave the company." "I'm not leaving," he said. The silence was dense. Another director tried to soften the blow. "We're not suggesting that yet, but there are legitimate concerns. The company's reputation is at stake. The relationship with the cleaning employee doesn't look good." Alexander smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. "Her name is Sophia." The room fell silent. "She has 2 children. She works harder than anyone here. And, for your information, there is no relationship. Not like you're insinuating. Then why are you protecting her? Why does she deserve it? And why are the company's lawyers handling the children's custody case?" Alexander rested his hands on the table. "Because justice is part of this company's culture. Do you remember the mission, vision, and values?" The chairman of the board sighed. "Alexander, you have to understand. It's not about what's right or wrong. It's about how it looks. It's about perception." Alexander stood up. He took his jacket. He spoke without raising his voice. "When someone who carries 2 children on their back to clean the floor is attacked for appearing too important, the ones who should feel shame are you." And he left. He could have gone straight to his car. He could have continued the day as if nothing had happened. But he didn't. He went down to the lobby. He entered the cleaning sector. Sophia wasn't there. A colleague said she had taken the day off. He went back up. He opened his office, turned on the lights, and saw that the reception TV was on. A live debate show. They were talking about him. And what's the real problem here? That he's in a relationship with a poor woman with children who is a cleaning employee, or that he's not ashamed to be seen with her? He's risking his position for an emotional affair. It's insane. Or maybe it's courage. Maybe no one there had the courage to look at someone invisible and say, "You deserve more." Alexander turned off the TV, and he made a decision. The company's annual convention was held the next day. A luxurious event with press, foreign executives, minority partners, and the entire corporate elite present. Everything was prepared in detail. The speech, the schedule, the lighting, the guest list. A theater of glass, power, and rhetoric. He put on his black suit. On the way, no one commented, but the driver gripped the steering wheel harder. The silence weighed more than the air conditioning. At the event, flashes awaited him at the entrance. "Alexander, is the cleaning lady your girlfriend? Is it true you'll legally recognize her children? Are you leaving the presidency?" He didn't answer. Inside the hall, the lighting bathed the stage in golden tones. The audience was seated, restless. Low murmurs, hidden phones recording. At the back of the hall, in a chair near the emergency exit, Sophia was sitting. She wore a simple shirt, dark trousers, and her hair was tied back with a common hair tie. She was visibly uncomfortable, but it wasn't him who invited her. It was the secretary, a middle-aged woman who, without saying anything, simply left the invitation on the table in the janitor's closet with a note. "He didn't ask for it, but I think he'd want you to come." Sophia didn't want to come, but she came, and now she was there. Small, out of place, alone, or almost. The master of ceremonies announced his name. Subdued applause, disguised expectations. Alexander went up on stage. The light found him. He looked at the audience. The teleprompter turned on. But he didn't read it. He took the microphone from the stand. He walked to the edge of the stage. He had a prepared speech. "But I'm not going to use it." The tension grew. "In the last few days, my name has been everywhere. Headlines, social media, internal meetings. Many are asking what's going on with me. what I'm thinking, what I'm hiding, why I did what I did. He took a breath, and the answer is simple. I saw someone, and I couldn't keep pretending I didn't see her. So, silence. In the middle of a 47-story building, full of people who talk about purpose, innovation, and humanity, I saw a woman, carrying 2 children while she cleaned the floor. No one looked at her. No one asked her name. But she was there, every day. The internal broadcast camera discreetly moved. It focused on the audience. Uncomfortable faces. Some looked down. Alexander continued. And I asked myself, when did we start believing that value has to do with a job title? That courage is just a word on a PowerPoint slide? He looked to the back of the hall. The bravest woman I have ever known is here today. Everyone turned. Sophia froze. Alexander didn't look away. She was ignored by everyone, except for me. Silence. For a second, no one knew what to do. Not to applaud, not to stand up, not to leave. Sophia wanted to disappear. Her face burned. Her eyes were moist. But she didn't cry. She was just there. And for the first time, she wasn't alone. Alexander got off the stage. He walked towards her, his eyes still fixed on hers. He passed between executives, board members, cameras. He stopped in front of her chair. He bowed slightly. He held out his hand. She looked at him as if she didn't know what that was. But she took it, for an instant. Then she let it go. I don't know if you know what you're doing, she said softly. I do, he replied. For the first time, I do. She breathed, firmly, but she didn't stand up. He understood. He went back up on stage. The audience applauded, some sincerely, others awkwardly, but no one laughed. No one dared to laugh. And in the midst of the applause, Sophia bowed her head, not out of shame, but because something inside her, something she had fought to keep intact, had just cracked. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the first real crack in the shield of someone who had spent her whole life having to defend herself. And that changed everything. The beginning of a new life. The entire world seemed to explode in a single applause or judgment. But when the lights went out and the journalists left, all that remained was the aftermath. Sophia returned home with the children asleep in her lap. Alexander, to a glass penthouse where the silence now weighed differently. Neither of them slept well that night, because the scandal was the first blow. But the real test was yet to come. The family court forum did not have the coldness of glass skyscrapers. The walls were yellowish. The paint was peeling in some corners. The wall clock was stopped, stuck for months, maybe years, as if time there was an uncomfortable visitor. People came and went, with folders in hand, pushing strollers, shaking hands they didn't want to shake. Sophia sat on the hallway bench. The twins were with the nanny on another floor, waiting. Her hands were cold, her eyes dry. She had already cried all the tears she had to cry. Now she just wanted to get through this, to survive one more time. Alexander stood 2 meters away, standing. Dark suit, broad shoulders, straight posture. But today there was something misaligned about him, as if the tension he carried was holding his jacket from the inside. "Do you need anything?" he asked, without getting too close. "No," she replied, looking straight ahead. The silence between them was not hostile. It was a safe place, almost intimate. The courtroom door opened. The officer called, "Case 29-4362, Sophia Vance versus Richard Easton." Sophia stood up. Alexander accompanied her. One of the lawyers tried to intervene. "Mr. Thorne, perhaps it's better if..." Alexander raised his hand firmly. The lawyer fell silent. They entered. The judge was a woman of advanced middle age, gray hair pulled back in a functional bun, impassive face, fine-framed glasses. She observed everything without haste, like someone who has seen too much to be in a hurry. Richard was already there. Expensive suit, gold watch, lawyer by his side. A cold smile on his lips. Your Honor, I would like to begin by pointing out that my client did not have access to the pregnancy, nor the birth of the children, for reasons beyond his control. The mother chose to raise them alone, without seeking him out, which compromised the natural bond. Sophia clenched her fists. The judge did not react. Alexander's lawyer, this time, was the one who spoke. His voice was firm, without frills. Your Honor, we would like to attach the documents we have gathered. They include screenshots of conversations where Mr. Easton encourages the termination of the pregnancy. There is also evidence of transfers made by Ms. Vance at a time when he refused to contribute financially, in addition to his proven disappearance through international travel records during the children's first 2 years of life. The judge received the material. She began to leaf through it, slowly, without haste. She took one screenshot in particular. She read aloud, "If you insist on this, you're on your own with that problem. I'm not going to be a father now." She paused. She looked at Richard. "Do you confirm having sent this message?" Richard looked away. The lawyer whispered something to him, but he didn't answer. The room was plunged into a heavy silence. The judge continued. "We also have here recent psychological reports. They were conducted with the children by specialists from the Public Defender's Office for Children. The reports are clear. Both children, although young, recognize Alexander Thorne as the predominant emotional father figure. There are records of multiple interactions, spontaneous accounts from the minors, and behavioral observations that reinforce the bond." Richard shook his head, letting out a cynical laugh. "Is that how it works now? A rich guy shows up, decides to play a good deed, and he's a father?" Alexander looked up. For the first time he spoke. "I didn't do charity. I was there, when no one else was, including you." The judge raised her hand. "Gentlemen, silence." Sophia said nothing. It wasn't necessary. She was there, whole. She didn't have a speech. She had a history. The judge closed the report. She looked at everyone. The state must ensure the best interests of the minors. The best interest is not always biological. It's emotional, affectionate, protective. Mr. Easton had 3 years to look for his children. 3 years, and he chose to show up now. She took a deep breath. Custody remains fully with the mother, Ms. Sophia Vance. Any attempt at reversal or appeal will be directed to the specialized court, but I anticipate that the evidence here is sufficiently clear about the absence of a paternal bond. The case is closed. A gavel struck, but the real sound happened inside. Richard stood up. He didn't look at anyone. He left, quickly, his suit more in line than his conscience. Sophia remained seated. Alexander, still standing. The room was emptying. She didn't smile. She didn't thank him. She didn't burst. She just felt her body soften. Not from relief, but from exhaustion. "Is it over?" she asked. Almost voicelessly. "For now?" Alexander replied. She stood up slowly. She looked at him. For a moment, it seemed she was going to say something important. But the silence between them imposed itself again. That same kind of silence that protects, that holds. "Thank you," she said. Low. True. "It's not necessary." She looked at him intently. "Yes, it is. Because you could have done it your way. But you respected mine." Alexander held her gaze. and for the first time he took a step forward. Just one. He held out his hand. She hesitated, but she took it. Not as someone accepting help, as someone acknowledging a choice. Their hands remained there. Firm, human, real. And for the first time since the day he saw her in the elevator, they were on the same ground, at the same height, with the same wound, at the same starting point. She slowly let go. They left the room, side by side, without haste. Outside, the sky was gray. The day did not promise sun, but it didn't threaten a storm either. It was one of those ordinary days in which extraordinary things happen without a sound. And they knew it. Something had definitely changed, but neither of them was in a hurry to name it. The unlikely home. The invitation didn't come with flowers or with grand speeches. It wasn't a scene from a soap opera. It was a conversation late in the afternoon with an opaque sky and the sound of children running in the background. Alexander sat on the front steps of the house, the same steps that had never had a use before. Sophia stood, leaning against the side column, her arms crossed, trying to hide the awkwardness of being there, in the middle, between what was provisional and what seemed too definitive. "The house is ready," he said. He didn't look at her as he spoke. "Their room is on the second floor, overlooking the garden. I put a lock on the inside, and a camera on the outside." She didn't reply immediately. "I want you to move in. I want them to be safe. And me? You decide." She hugged herself, as if the posture could protect her from something that still had no form. "I don't know if I can live in a place where everything is perfect. Nothing is perfect. It just has an alarm and space." She looked at the ground for a moment. Then she looked up. "I'll bring my own plates. Just bring yourself." The answer was simple, direct, almost dry. But it held a kind of tenderness that isn't learned. It's revealed. The next week she moved in, not all at once. She arrived in pieces, 2 backpacks, a shopping cart, the toys in a black bag, the clothes in cardboard boxes, the children in the back seat of a car she never thought she would get into. Alexander's house was spacious, but silent. That kind of silence that resonates, that makes you listen to yourself more than you would like. The first dinner was at the kitchen bar. The children made a mess with the pasta. One spilled juice on the floor. Sophia knelt to clean it up, out of reflex. Alexander knelt with her, took a cloth, and helped. "It's not necessary," she said in a whisper. "I know," he replied, and he didn't stop. The first night was difficult. The twins didn't sleep. One cried. The other had nightmares. Sophia got up 4 times. Alexander, twice. The whole house was awake, but no one complained. The next morning, the smell of coffee filled the kitchen before the light did. Sophia was standing barefoot in one of his oversized, comfortable t-shirts. She didn't even notice. Alexander walked in. He paused for a second at the door. He watched her from behind. She felt it. "Is it too early?" "No," he said. "It's okay." They drank coffee without talking much. The children appeared later, with pillow marks on their faces. One climbed onto Alexander's lap. The other sat on the floor and began to play with a spoon. Nothing was forced, nor was it natural. It was an in-between place. A process. The days passed. Sophia began to organize the house's cupboards. Not out of obligation, out of unease. She organized the dishes, folded the kitchen towels, learned to use the industrial-sized stove. Alexander noticed the small changes. The fridge now had colorful magnets. One of the cupboards had child locks. Crayon drawings from the twins appeared taped to his office wall. In one, drawn with a red pencil, a figure with gray hair and a watch on its wrist was drawn. "Is that me?" Alexander asked. The boy smiled. He nodded. And why don't I have a mouth? Because you almost never talk. Alexander laughed, but it made him think. In the third week, he came home from work later than usual. He found Sophia in the living room, with her hair wet and her eyes fixed on a show she wasn't watching. "Did everything go well?" she asked. "I chewed out 3 directors and won 2 lawsuits." She smiled, barely. He sat down beside her. He was silent. "I thought it would be stranger," she said after a while. "And is it?" "No, but I'm afraid of getting used to it." "Why?" "Because when you get used to something, it hurts more when it ends." He turned his face. He didn't answer. After a while, he said, "I'm not here by chance." She looked him in the eye for a second. Deep, uneasy. "And I didn't come out of necessity." "I know." The next night, he appeared in the kitchen with a bag of French bread and 2 cartons of milk. "I went to the supermarket. I remembered you like to heat up milk before bed." "I didn't tell you that." "You told the child. I listened." She looked away, but she accepted the gesture. On Friday, she cooked dinner. He came home with 2 bags of ice cream. "It's cold," she said. "The ice cream isn't about the weather. It's about memory." "What memory?" "My father used to bring home ice cream when he didn't know how to apologize." She stopped. "Are you apologizing?" "No, I'm remembering." She served the plates. He sat down. The children scattered around the table as always. In the middle of dinner, one of them looked at Sophia and asked, "Do we live here now?" She hesitated. She looked at Alexander. He held her gaze for a second. "Yes," he said. The child smiled and continued eating. In the early morning of that day, Sophia woke up startled by a clap of thunder. She left her room. She found Alexander sitting in the hallway armchair in his pajamas, with a cup in his hand. "You couldn't sleep either?" "I heard crying. I thought it was one of them. It was me." He stood up. "Come." She went with him to the kitchen. They said nothing for minutes. "I still don't know what we are," she said. "Me neither. And does that bother you?" "No, because every time I try to put a name to it, it falls short." She swallowed. He touched her shoulder, carefully, like someone learning to touch for the first time. She didn't pull away, but she didn't move closer either. They just stayed like that. Still, as if something was forming between them, without haste, without fear, without promises. Just presence. The next day, Alexander left work early. He went to a toy store. He bought a giant puzzle. One of the children adored it. The other tried to eat the pieces. Sophia laughed. He pretended he didn't care, but he carefully saved the box lid. That night, they watched a movie together. The children fell asleep on the sofa. She got a blanket. He tucked them both in. When she stood up, he took her hand, without thinking. "What should I?" She stayed, but it wasn't time to say anything yet. They still didn't say, "We are together," but they already were, and they knew it, even in silence, even if it had no name. Because there are things that don't need titles, just time and truth. The company's ballroom was more illuminated than ever. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling like constellations, trapped in the marble. The guests were seated at long tables, dressed in their finest, speaking in low voices, drinking slowly. There was a polished tension in the air, as if everyone knew this wasn't just another event. And it wasn't. Not after everything. Alexander arrived without haste. Dark blue suit, simple tie. Without that shield in his gaze that he used to wear like armor. He didn't smile at everyone, but he looked people in the eye. Those who thought themselves too important looked away. The small ones responded with respect. Sophia entered a few minutes later. No announcement, no spotlights. But it was impossible not to notice her. The red dress, simple, without shine, without a brand name, contrasted with everything around her. And yet, she didn't look out of place. She looked complete, with her children by her side, holding their hands, like someone who enters another's world without asking permission, but also without apologizing. Alexander saw her, and he didn't hide anything. He crossed the ballroom in the middle of a toast, in the middle of a random conversation. He wasn't waiting for the right moment, because the moment was now. She stopped. He held out his arm. Sophia hesitated for half a second, and she accepted. They walked together, their steps in sync, their gazes in silence. In the center of the ballroom, he didn't give a corporate speech. He just breathed. And he said, "This is Sophia, the woman who changed the way I see the world." No one applauded immediately, but no one laughed either. Some gripped their glasses tighter. Others looked down. Until one of the oldest employees began to clap. 1, 2, 3 times. Then another, and another. And without rehearsal, the entire ballroom was applauding, not out of obligation, but out of truth. She didn't cry. He didn't smile excessively. But both their eyes carried the same contained shine of someone who has learned to feel with care, like someone holding something too precious to squeeze. Months later, the lawn of the garden was higher than it should have been. The trees cast shadows over abandoned toys in the yard. One of the twins was lying on the ground, looking up at the sky as if he wanted to learn to read clouds. The other was running after a paper airplane. Sophia was sitting in the hammock, jeans, a loose t-shirt, her hair tied back effortlessly. Alexander arrived with 2 glasses of juice. He handed her one. He sat on the ground, leaning against the porch step. "They fell asleep at school today," she commented. "The teacher said they're teaching the others how to draw." She smiled. "They're good at that. They're good at almost everything. They get it from their mother." She looked at him. She didn't say anything. After a while, he said, "I thought about asking before, but I thought it would seem rushed." "Ask what?" He held up his right hand. In it, a small box. Wooden, without shine. Discreet. Sophia didn't move. He opened it. Simple rings, without stones, without ostentation. "Will you marry me?" She watched him like someone reading a page they didn't expect to find. Then she said, "I think we're already a family. Getting married is just a detail." Alexander closed the box, but he didn't put it away. "Still, I want them to see it. For us to see it. For us to choose it." She got up from the hammock. She walked towards him. She took the little box. "Okay, then let's show them." The wedding happened at home. There was no formal ceremony, no priest, no judge. There was a pergola covered with leaves, a table with flowers picked from the garden, plastic chairs borrowed from the neighbors, and an old radio playing a song no one knew but everyone enjoyed. The twins came in with the rings inside toy containers. One threw his. The other held them. They laughed. The world laughed with them. Sophia came in holding the children's hands. Beige dress. Simple, but beautiful. Alexander was waiting for her in a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, no tie. There was no speech, only glances, promises without words. When they exchanged the rings, it was like sealing something that already existed. Not a beginning, but a recognition. After the "I do," no one shouted, no one threw rice. But there was a calm in the air that no one dared to break. The two hugged, slowly, deeply, like someone who understands that love didn't arrive just now. It was, finally, named. Later that night, the children slept on the sofa, huddled together. Sophia took off her shoes. She went to the kitchen. Alexander was washing the dishes. I never imagined getting married in a backyard. Me neither. And it was the best place possible. She walked over. She rested her forehead on his back. He put down the dish. He turned. They kissed. Without haste. Without ceremony. Because the improbable, when it decides to happen, doesn't need permission. Just space. And truth. And they already had both. Now, they also had each other. And that was enough. If this story moved you deep inside, comment here. Would you let someone into your life like that? Or would you close the door for fear of getting hurt again? Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters. And hit the notification bell. Every story is a jolt of truth.